from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in, explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased joining me from New York today, Aaron Painter, the founder, CEO of NameTag. So tell what you're currently up to, and then we can deep dive into the discussion. So the floor is yours.
That's great. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I work at NameTag. I founded the company about 4 years ago. Prior to that, I spent 14 years at Microsoft, working mostly around the world. I spent only 2 of the 14 years really in Seattle and sort of the Microsoft headquarters. And the rest of my time was several years in France, Brazil, and China, Hong Kong, and focused on helping Microsoft really expand and open into new international markets. After that, I left. I wrote a book focused on employee and customer loyalty and the connection between the two. Often stems from a culture of listening. And then I went to run a cloud computing consulting firm that was based in London. It was AWS's kind of first and largest partner in the European market. And it was a sort of crazy fun growth journey. And it was just then at the start of the pandemic, actually, coincidentally, I moved kind of to the US or back to the US. And I was starting to think about what to focus on next and where I might be able to have impact. And then I had these sort of friends and family members all almost at the same time, the start of the pandemic, who went through this journey of having their identity stolen. Their accounts were sort of taken over. You might remember that beginning of COVID, everything was going digital. And turns out that people saw an opportunity in taking over user accounts. So I was a good friend. I was a good son. I tried to be. I said, we're going to jump on the phone. We're going to call customer support hotlines. We're going to figure this out. We're going to figure out what happened. And it turned out when we called, in order to help us, they asked us a few sort of security questions, which were either super easy or really hard and complex. But regardless, someone had called before us and they knew the answer to those questions. And because of that, they were able to take over the accounts of people that I cared about. So we sort of said, how does this still happen in the modern world? Multi-factor authentication, all these layers of security we put on the accounts in our digital lives. How is it so easy for someone to take them over simply by calling the help desk and pretending to be you? And it turned out that the technology didn't really exist to really prove who was human and who that human was behind a screen, on a computer screen or on the phone. And that's what we set out to build with NameTag, a way to verify the identity of a person with high fidelity and high confidence, and then a way to integrate that into identity solutions so people can reset things like MFA or their password without needing to call the help desk. And then also more advanced tools for help desk agents to be able to verify users with something better than a security question or an SMS.
Cool, Aaron. And actually, I think, usually I ask founders like yourself, Aaron, like, what was the inspiration for you? But actually, you lived it, I mean, through France. And, I remember as well the first, I think, 2 or 3 months where everything, was closed. So everyone shifted to Teams and Zooms, and the challenge was when I hear this from a lot of friends. So, for example, the person would dial in and I'm sitting at home, I'm not like wearing comfortable, I can't open the camera, and like so on. And we predicted like these things will happen. But the question is, from your point of view, why actually the technology, you know I would not say failed us, but why we didn't see this is coming? Is this like a kind of a, so they say the COVID itself is a black swan event, right? So was this like kind of a security black swan event also as well?
It's a great question. I think part of the reason has been that the technology that existed to verify someone's identity wasn't built for security. It had really been built for regulatory compliance. is often, familiar now. Maybe if you open, let's say, a new bank account in a remote way, someone's going to ask you to scan your ID and take a selfie. And it's for, know your customer regulations, anti-money laundering laws. A variety of jurisdictions around the world have some form of this. And the challenge with it is it's sort of good enough. It checks the regulatory compliance box that you've done your best to see who someone is. But it was sort of a mystery to me. Why does a bank do that? And then yet when you call the bank, let's say to transact or wire transfer to make an account change, they don't rely on that information anymore. They ask you these security questions or send you an SMS code or something to that effect. And so it turned out the technology that had been built was all about the regulatory compliance for knowing your customer. It wasn't about security. And so that was where for us it led to this opportunity to say, can we re-innovate? Can we reinvent the same end user experience of scanning your ID and taking a selfie? But can we do it exclusively on a mobile device? And it turns out if you use a mobile device to have someone scan their ID and take a selfie, we're able to create a much better end user experience that averages 23 seconds the first time, single seconds the second time. It's faster. It feels slick. It feels native like a good mobile app does, but it's also much more secure because the all of the advanced telemetry and the cryptography in the mobile device platforms let us take advantage of these features. And we didn't set out to solve for this 4 years ago. We're actually solving for what we call digital manipulation at that time. But what you would now think of as deep fakes and the ability to use deep fakes and to deploy them when you're trying to impersonate someone and take over their account is a very real threat that by using mobile devices and the technology we created around it, we're able to prevent.
I don't, this is very critical, I think, but let's go one step back and, and I think this is important for anyone. Like, it's not only for enterprises, it's important even for individuals also as well, because to your point, like logging to my banking accounts, I have to do this. If I am working for an organization and, someone does this takeover, hack on my account, huge consequences, right? So let's just go one step back and explain to the audience, in a scenario, how does this happen? If we want to, go step by step, like the anatomy of such social engineering attack, how does this go?
One of the best ones to look at a little bit might be the MGM attack, which came public sort of last August. And MGM, you might know, a series of casinos and hotels and things in Las Vegas. And MGM, it did many things that were very forward on security, including putting multi-factor authentication on their employee accounts. But a bad actor was able to call the IT help desk at MGM and pretend to be an employee and claim essentially that they were locked out of their MFA, their multi-factor authentication. And the help desk rep did what help desk reps are trained to do the best they could. They tried to help. And so in order to get that person back to work and back into their account, they went through a series of questions and processes to verify who that person was. And those methods, unfortunately, were not secure. They often involved questions. And in that particular case, they involved even sending maybe an SMS to a phone. And that phone number, then you sort of are only as control of the phone numbers only means that the telco itself provided the phone number is also really good at preventing someone from taking over the account. And so unfortunately, that's not true. And so it's very difficult for telco providers, just like it is for companies' help desks. So that bad actor called the help desk, pretended to be the user, and in 10 minutes or so was able to get access. MFA was reset, and the bad actor was able to log in to the MGM network, deposit ransomware, and took down MGM for almost 2 weeks. It was massively significant, and it turned out to be only the start of what has been really a crime epidemic in the last several months since. Hundreds and hundreds of companies, just in the Q4 of last year alone, were targeted by this very method because it's simply too easy to socially engineer your way into taking over an account. It turns out that MFA is only as secure as the reset or the recovery process. Because if you've given someone a YubiKey or an RSA token or an authenticator app and you've tried to make the login really secure, the process is only as secure as what happens if you lose access to that. And that's sort of where the vulnerability has been exposed. And it's very human. And now it's getting even more powerful because bad actors can use Gen AI and deep fakes in their impersonation attempts.
Got you, Aaron. Now, if I want to ask how we solve this, I mean, from your perspective, like if you can explain to us, and I will come to the AI deepfake part later, but uh, how did you imagine, the solution would work? Because security, this is what I was taught when I took, my first courses is in security. So you need to authenticate with something who you are and something you have, right? So and this is where the multi-factor authentication altogether came. So like walk me through how you imagine the solution and how you are now solving it to your customers.
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges is that multi-factor authentication today is, if you think of it in its most secure form, really relies on the device. And you sort of say, does someone have access to a device? Is it the same device that they use maybe to log in or to sign up? If they have access to that device, then we sort of trust that they are the person. It's kind of like Face ID, you might think. You set up Face ID on your iOS device, and every time you set up your face the first time, and every time you open your phone, you're using the same face. The challenge is Apple in that case doesn't actually know who you are or whose face it is. They just know it's the same face that enrolled. And that's one of the particularly big challenges. So there was a Wall Street Journal article last February where, like it was a dad in Florida who said, I'm locked out of my iCloud account and all my family photos are there, my kids' photos. I just want access again. And Apple said, well, sorry, you're locked out. We don't know that you're the account owner. And he said, well, you have Face ID. You see my face every day. You must know I'm the account owner. And they said, yeah, but we don't know who you actually are. And he offered $10,000. He offered to fly to Cupertino to in person, try and get his account unlocked. But that's the reality we face. It's that when people get locked out, or frankly, even when they set up their accounts, we don't actually know who the human is behind the screen. And so multi-factor authentication that relies only on the device simply isn't sufficient for those moments of reset up, let's say, or recovery.
Yeah. Now let's go back to the deep fake part and the AI part, Aaron. So we heard the stories, since especially, the acceleration, I would call it, of the adoption of AI to the mass public
Mhm.
after OpenAI released, ChatGPT, of course, and people
Yes.
started to open their eyes. 11 Labs came out, and, people, oh, now I can clone a voice, and, all these tools that start to pop out.
Mhm.
Now, from your perspective, how do you think, a bad actor would leverage, such technologies like deepfake and AI in general to
Mhm.
trick their victims that, okay, this is very legit, it's us, it's the IT department, it's not someone else. So, and what's the countermeasure for that?
Well, it's interesting. So companies like Okta recommended after this MGM breach that you do something called visual verification, which is kind of like this. Means that, when something goes wrong, you need to verify who the user is, let's say to recover their account. They recommend that you jump on a video call. And on the video call, you're verifying who the person is. Maybe you see them, and you ask them questions. Maybe you compare them to a badge photo, or you ask them to hold up an ID document in the video call. And then that would sort of be the best way. So many companies in the last few months have moved to that technique. Challenge, of course, is very time consuming. It's very expensive. It's frustrating. The user might be not able to work or access their account for a long period of time. It requires their time. It requires support team time. Very expensive. But all of this relied on us trusting who's on the other end of the screen that we're seeing. And then a few months ago, there was this really interesting incident that's really changed a lot of people's perspective. And what happened was it was rumored to be a multinational finance company. It turned out to be a design and kind of architecture company. But the CFO, or the person claiming to be the CFO, was in London, and the finance controller was in Hong Kong. And the CFO said, finance controller, I need you to do a series of wire transfers for me. The controller was a little bit suspicious. So this seems unusual. So the CFO said, okay, well, several of us from the leadership team are on a video call right now. Let me send you a link. Why don't you join? And then you can get the approvals that you need. So the controller clicked on the link, joined the video call, and it turned out on the video call were a series of deep fake emulators or pieces of software that were creating real-time deep fakes of members of the leadership team. So the controller said, oh, I recognize these people. I see their voices. I see them speaking. These are the people I know. Clearly, this is okay to approve. And they went on and they drafted for $25 million. And so it called into question this whole concept that we can actually trust what we're seeing on these video calls. And the problem is very similar to what we talked about with the know your customer requirements. They were built to solve a different problem. Platforms like Zoom or Teams, they make it easy to choose your camera, to choose your microphone. And so it's equally easy to choose a third party piece of software that's actually a deep fake emulating piece of software and project that right into your video call. And so it becomes this platform where they weren't built for security. They were built for convenience, to make it easy to join those calls, to collaborate with people. But unfortunately, that's also made it too easy for bad actors to put in fake or impersonate someone else.
Now, but someone might argue with us now, Aaron, that
Right.
yeah, but you know what? We need the convenience because our users are complaining that because like back still many companies they do this. They do the password rotation policy, complex password
Mhm.
policies,
Mhm.
two-factor authentication, and sometimes more. And honestly speaking, I've seen it myself because I started my career, doing help desk job, by the way.
Oh,
So for
wow. Amazing.
so for people who doesn't know, and when we used to work with, let's say, the VIP people in the organization, they
Mhm.
want convenience. They say, I don't have time. Like I have to do the meeting. I don't have time to do this and that. And this is, imagine this was like maybe quite 20 years ago. So, whenever we like, because they didn't want to change the password frequently. And
Right.
maybe later on, the feedback I start to hear from people that I used to work with. Yeah. When the MFA start to come out, the same thing. Oh, we don't want another. So now, how much awareness, Aaron, is important on the board level? Because maybe someone say it's just just a password, just a login,
Mhm.
and why we need this for the help desk and for the people who are responsible for changing the password. So when you meet with executives, how
Mhm.
do you put it from not only technology perspective but also from business perspective?
Yeah, I think there's been a big shift. Prior to MGM in particular in August, we were asking companies, have you thought about this? Are you worried about the vulnerability of social engineering? And some were. In fact, some of our earliest, very big name customers, big brands, were aware of it and thought about this. But post MGM, now most boards are directly asking their CTOs and CISOs, how are we going to respond to things like the MGM risk? And most CISOs I talk to, they have either survived some sort of social engineering attack, or they are fighting it off, or unfortunately they fell victim to it. This has become the leading cyber attack vector of the moment. It is of the season. This is how bad actors are taking over accounts because it's not really even technical. It's pure social engineering. It's pure using a vulnerability in how the technology is set up or established. I agree with you on the point of friction. And the challenge is that I actually don't think MFA today is particularly low friction. I think maybe just a password or something like that was perhaps, but actually the idea of having to go set up your authenticator app and the friction around setting that up and then opening it and typing in the code, that's not particularly low friction. But it's even worse today is if you happen to get locked out of that, because then it becomes a multiple hour or sometimes days. There's some leading companies where it takes weeks to get back into your account if you get locked out of MFA. And so those processes are incredibly high friction and frustration. I'm sure you remember from your help desk days, no one really loved the identification or the security questions. You probably didn't like asking them. The user didn't like answering them. And those things don't work. And the methods that are more secure are incredibly high frustration today.
I still hate them till date because so I try to be smart as well, right? So when still if I see any website that uses this like old fashioned kind of secret questions, so what I try to do is not to put the same questions and answers everywhere, and then
Right.
I end up that I forget and I don't want to write them down, of course, for security purposes. So I
Right.
end up like, okay, what, which question I put on which website. But so I want to now ask you something also related to this, Aaron. Like,
Mhm.
sometimes I sit down and I say, okay, we have brilliant technology, right? All over the place, whatever, Um, but sometimes I look on few things or concepts that we still use today, and I
Mhm.
ask why no one disrupted this. For example, um, why actually I still need to put a username and password? Why would it come up with something more smart to identify me? Why, people has been talking about passwordless for long time.
Yeah.
So what's your point of view on passwordless and not having to put your a password actually that and we know that the majority of the folks will put it on a sticky note somewhere in their offices, right? So uh, and they will give the MFA to someone else to do it on their behalf. So let's I've seen this. I'm talking from the field. So why we didn't come up with something like better and is passwordless in the way that many companies are talking about today is really the future of authentication into the internet and the internal system and so on.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are really good advances in technology, but one of the big things that we often have to consider, or any companies really considering when they're rolling things out, is can this be universally workable today? Can it work for everyone? And so when you think about passkeys, which is one of the implementations that's kind of getting the most noise around passwordless, it's sort of a misnomer. Passkeys are convenient and they are more secure in some ways. The challenge is one, with recovery and provisioning. How do you make sure you are the legitimate account owner setting them up? That's still a concern with passkeys, just as it was prior to. Also, there's a sort of a misconfusion, but you still have a password when you set up a passkey. It is sort of an express way to log in without typing in the password, but your account still has a password associated with it, which means you have the same broader security risk where somebody can claim that they are you, that they are locked out, and they can't access their account. And so we actually haven't solved or stopped the social engineering risk by thinking about things like passkeys. So one of the big things that we like to think about is how can you, similar notion around digital IDs. Some countries are getting very progressive on digital ID rollouts and plans. India is one of the most aggressive in having something that's really out there. The US is incredibly slow and incredibly behind. Some states are thinking about individual state IDs that are digital, and it's moving very slowly. You need something though that kind of everybody can use. And so, for example, our platform, we started working with digital ID platforms like Aadhaar very closely. We do wonderful things for our users in India and other nations around the world as they're building these programs. But we need it to work for everyone. We need it to work with the passport that they have today, with the identity card, the driver's license they have today. Because if you're going to roll out, a solution for all of your users, most companies have users, employees, or customers around the world. You need something that works today because the today is the crisis. The best today we have today are these silly security questions or things like that. And so we've tried to introduce something that can be universally applicable, that can be easy to deploy and roll out, that everybody can benefit from. And then, of course, we're going to continue to integrate new technologies as they come along. So we advocate for surrounding what you have today. Keep your Okta, keep your Duo, keep your Microsoft MFA. We're not advocating to replace it. We're actually advocating to close the security and the expense loophole of dealing with people who are, let's say, locked out.
That's fantastic. Now, we've talked about the effect of implementing your solution on let's say the employees from the help desk perspective.
Mhm.
You know how you can help, for example, the help desk manager or end user, director maybe. Uh, so I like to ask these questions because I sit on both sides of the table. So if I
Yes.
want to think about, ROI perspective, so does this, for example, reduce the number of requests that comes on daily basis for resetting the passwords? Like, does it add any productivity also to the help desk team altogether?
That's how we like to think of it. In fact, we have two solutions that are most common today. And one is we call it a co-pilot for help desk agents. So instead of the help desk agent having to ask you security questions, they can send you a link via chat, via email, on the phone, a whole bunch of delivery mechanisms. And they send the link, and with a little bit of instruction, hey, we use this to verify who you are. The end user goes through the verification process, and then the help desk rep knows who they're talking to. And so they can proceed with the account transaction. It's just using modern tools to make help desk agents' lives better, more secure, better for the end user. Kind of everyone wins. But then what we found was that increasingly there are certain tickets, and particularly lockout tickets, And for most companies, up to 50% of their help desk tickets are users who are locked out or have identity related issues. So we said, what if we could make that self-service? And for us, about 90 days ago, 3, 4 months ago, we launched sort of an out of the box self-service way that a company can roll out for their users so that when you are locked out, instead of having to call the help desk, you can go type in your email, verify yourself with NameTag, and then we reach into Okta, Duo, Entra, OneLogin, others, and perform the reset just like the help desk agent would. So then it's a much faster experience for the end user, and the help desk can be more efficient because they don't have to deal with every ticket. They can focus more on the higher value tickets, the important ones, while deflecting many of them to self-service.
That's cool, Aaron. Now, something out of curiosity also, and maybe it might look like a not very good question, but just it came to my mind. I know, like, currently you don't play in that arena, but if we can do this for individuals, right? Can we think about something similar to service accounts, for example? Like, because everyone talks about privileged access management solutions, and I had a lot of guests who always they say we always kept coming up with solutions, but we never solved the problem because still again you have to put a username and password over there, and even if you have the multi-factor authentication, here you go, the same thing. So now if I want to take this, if I want to think, can this be taken to, we know that majority of the IT services are run, of course, not by the actual people's username. It's like there's a service account behind it. Can something be done for that use case, Aaron?
Yeah, we like to focus on verifying humans and know who the human is and know every time that we can re-verify them. So the world where you create a one-time, verified profile on things like X or Twitter or Airbnb, to us, but it's not sufficient because you don't know that that account hasn't been compromised. You haven't shared credentials with someone else. And so we advocate for this rule of re-verification. And our technology makes that really simple so that once a user creates a name tag, they can reuse it in single seconds with even just a selfie if they're on the same device. And one of our technologies compares the selfie to earlier selfies back to the government ID. So it's more secure, but it's also a better user experience. So you can think about many different ways to put this into different parts of your flow. So it might be a step up off, or where I think you're going, we've seen companies want to do is create sort of authorized users. So rather than just have one shared set of credentials, you might say, hey, these set of humans have the ability to access this service on behalf of our company. And then you know who each of the people are, and then you sort of associate a name tag with each person. And so you add kind of authorized users basically to an account, but they're not usernames or emails. They're actual identities of a person, which gives you more security, gives you better audit trail. It solves issues if that person might leave the company or move on, a whole bunch of other problems by being able to verify the human behind the screen versus just the device, let's say, or a shared email.
That's cool. One thing, I forget to mention a comment on your approach, Aaron, is that I like when you say, like, keep what you're using today, we come on top of that. So it's kind of, decentralization of the whole process. So it's like you have, like, the customers will get you on their back, so in case something wrong happens. So I like this approach rather than, okay, because majority of the time what happens, I've seen it, people, let's say they change their phones, right? Where the authenticator, it happened to me one time actually, so I forget to export the codes, and so I had to contact the help desk for that, and this is could be actually a social engineering attempt also as well, like, hey, I lost my phone, it gets stolen, I have a new phone, I need to activate this. So I've seen, like, also we've done some work in that, Aaron, which is just a small comment from my side. I don't know if you want to say something regarding this.
No, I think you're spot on. That is the challenge. And you might say, oh, how often do I get locked out? Actually, some people get locked out quite often. There's a very high frequency for a variety of reasons. But it's not just that. It's that by not putting a layer of protection or insurance on your lockout process, anybody can call and claim that they're you and claim that they're locked out. Then, let alone if they do it and they're armed with new information from the dark web or data set that have been leaked to answer your security questions, or maybe they're using a deep fake of your voice from one of these great podcasts or the video, right? It's just too easy to impersonate someone today. And our entire internet digital infrastructure, our lives revolve around the security of these digital accounts. And the best thing we had was MFA. And now I think what we're realizing is that MFA alone is not sufficient because it's too easy to simply say you're locked out of it. And that's where the social engineering opportunity comes in. And that's where we try and focus.
Absolutely. Now, I want to shift a little bit gears. Something not related to the technology. It's like more about your experience, Aaron, because really it's a very rich experience. So the first thing I want to ask you, as a founder, how much your international experience shaped your approach to leadership and innovation. And I'm asking this question because majority of the founders that I met and I interviewed, so let's say they are living all their lives in the US, or they're living all their lives in the UK, or they're living all their lives here in the MENA region. So how this helped you also in shaping the messaging of the company, and dealing with international customers?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest was, culturally. It was I lived and worked in many different countries and places where I didn't look or sound like other people at the table. And so I had to find a way to sort of fit in. I had to find a way to earn respect, and find a way to try and add value to a conversation. And one of the techniques that I learned that was very effective in that was listening, and listening with sort of a deep curiosity to understand. And one of the things I talked about in my book was moving to markets like Brazil, or eventually even later in mainland China, for example, where I didn't, I certainly didn't speak the language at first. And I was nervous even to go out and talk to Microsoft customers in the region because I felt like I couldn't communicate with them. They didn't speak English. Let's say they spoke Portuguese and I didn't speak Portuguese. And so how are they going to want to talk with me? And what I found was that going and spending time with them and really listening to what was on their mind, and sometimes a little bit of translation. Maybe sometimes they know some English words, or I'd be learning some Portuguese words. But the act of listening made them feel like I cared. They felt respected because I was so interested in trying to understand what they were expressing, that by feeling respected, they felt they could trust me. And we were able to build sort of a trusted relationship. And I think without listening, it's difficult to feel respected, and it's difficult to have trust if you don't feel respected. And so that's sort of what worked for me, both with our customers and with my employees and the teams that I was leading, was being someone who was really wanted to understand, made them feel like we could be partners. And that cultural value is one that I've certainly carried with me all around the world.
Fantastic. Now, final question, Aaron, here, before we do like conclusion. How much your also experience with big names like Microsoft helped you as a founder? Because majority of the time we hear this from experts. They say, okay, it's better to go work for like a big player, learn how things get done, and then once you start your own company, things would become much easy. I mean, of course, not easy in the sense of easy, but I mean, you start to apply what you have learned with big players. How this journey also shaped the journey for you to be a successful founder?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there are pros and cons of working at companies of all sizes. One of the things I often say is that a large company by design is meant so that a single person really can't bring it down. You can't break it. Like, you have enough redundancy in the system that you want the company to be able to survive if one person doesn't do something well or does something wrong. That's sort of its inherent design. Whereas in a smaller company, actually one person really makes a difference. You can make a difference in both places, but when someone's on vacation, you miss them, right? The company can't grow or move as fast. And so you have different types of impact, but fundamentally at an earlier stage, you really have a different type of impact because it's a smaller number of people. And so you're a greater percentage of the horsepower, the brain power that's kind of driving it. I've had this chance to work in really large organizations, even though I was doing very entrepreneurial things at Microsoft and big things at scale. I had a chance to work in sort of a scale up or a mid-sized company. And then I've had to sort of, build from zero into what's becoming a bigger company. But what really I get excited about from the Microsoft learning is sort of this focus on enterprise. It's very unusual for new companies to be created and really just go to enterprise first. They often start with very small business or mid-market or sign yourself up, and we have a few users. And we very early on took on very large enterprise customers because we spent several years building the technology to earn that credibility, to earn that respect. So we had an enterprise ready product that we took to the enterprise. And that's just been very unique in our growth pattern. And so now we're serving a lot of very large enterprises and more every day. One day I would like to make sure that we're serving companies of all sizes and solving this problem for them. But today we're really good at solving it for larger organizations in particular.
Amazing and great insights, Aaron. And yeah, I'm sure, because the problem you're solving is everyone's problem, but of course, like being an enterprise, I know the taste of it and how it's challenging but fun at the same time working with enterprise. So 100% on that. Aaron, like finally, the question I ask at the end is how people can get in touch and know more about NameTag.
Well, definitely. Our website's getnametag.com, but we're very active on LinkedIn. I think that's kind of become the platform of business in many ways today. And so I post a lot. We post a lot from the NameTag account. We talk a lot about fraud. We try and really educate on what's happening in the market and commenting on news. So if this is an area you care about and you're interested, please follow along, read some of the content, engage on it. And then, of course, reach out if there's a way we can be helpful or it's an area you're trying to think through in your company.
Great. I will make sure that the links are in the show notes. Aaron, really, I enjoyed the conversation. I didn't even feel the time. It passed very, very fast because it's uh, you named it very well. You said it's an epidemic, that happens after the pandemic, for a lot of people and organizations, of course. So thank you for sharing your insights and also sharing the way you're trying to help people solving this challenge, which is a very serious challenge. You brought the story of MGM, which is, I think I discussed it a lot last year, also with cybersecurity experts on the podcast and offline also as well. So 100%, it's something everyone should be aware of. And usually this is how I'll end my podcast episode. So this is for the audience. If you just discovered this podcast by luck, thank you for passing by. I really hope you enjoyed. So if you did so, please give us thumbs up. Subscribe to the podcast. We are available on all podcasting platforms. We are available also on YouTube. And if you are one of the people who keep coming back and share their feedback and comments, thank you for doing so. Please keep them coming. I read all your messages. And again, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll meet again very soon. Thank you. Bye bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.